normal, natural, traditional, and middle class. I actually, most of my formative years were divided between the suburbs of Kolkata and also a kind of industrial town not very far from Kolkata called Durgapur. And very strangely, so it is a town, it is not a city, but that's where I was first introduced to cosmopolitan way of thinking, um, living my life and things like that. And I say it's strange because it is not a big city, and yet it had so much open mindedness and such a mixed crowd of people coming from different states of India, different strata of the society, and everything. That's the reason I kind of like to think of it as much more cosmopolitan than even some cities, I would say. So that's essentially my upbringing. And to talk about my early influencers, this is going to sound very naive, but actually, my grandfather was my earliest influencer in some way. He was a great believer in my ability, which was very limited at that point, but he was still a great believer, and that did motivate me to try harder to achieve new things and stuff like that. And in fact, I had dedicated my PhD thesis to him because of this reason. And another big influence in my life was actually one of my uncle, and he first got me introduced to quantitative thinking, computers and stuff like that. And one part of it was, of course, that he got me introduced in things that I later on use in my research. But again, I think the most important part was these people believed in me, and that kind of kept me going. So that's, yeah, that would be the answer to your question. Yeah, okay. So actually, again, my influence that I had from my grandfather was at a very young age. So unfortunately, he passed away when I was in um, class 2 or 3, something like that. So I had him for when I was I mean, a toddler and a kid. And yet, whenever I would be excited about any new thing that I learned, he would always make a I at this point I think a very big deal about it, and he would say that that's so fantastic that I can do this. So then I'm sure I'm going to go ahead and um, you know uh, change the world. That kind of a feeling. Of course, he was probably just doing all. Probably all grandfathers do that. That's what I feel later on, but at that point that used to feel like the whole world is in front of me and I can do anything that I wanted to do. So that was extremely empowering. My uncle's influence was much later in life. As I mentioned, it was about computers and stuff. So he actually really taught me computer programming. And um, uh, and uh, and later on I figured out that there were actually not that many women who are um, who have ever been told that they're good in computer programming. So that believing in that ability um, was quite rare. And of course I didn't know that at that point. All of these things, you kind of, in retrospect, you think about it and then you feel that they have been amazing. And um, and you kind of remember it throughout your life. So that's the specific examples I would say of them being. You don't really mm, kind of know it beforehand how big of an influence they are, but just the fact that their influence remains to this day, it must have been spectacular. And seriously, I'm talking about when I was a toddler. So if I can remember that feeling even now, and as you rightly pointed out, when you are at a dark place, you have to go back to these feelings and draw strength from it. and kind of feel like, okay, these guys believed in me, so there must be something. I have to keep going, and maybe I will be, this is a passing phase of uh, darkness, and I'm going to overcome it. Those kind of positive feelings, you don't really know you draw it from these, but you do, because he didn't teach me in a traditional way at all. In schools you always learn to, 90% of things are memorizing and just depicting it in an exam. But what my uncle taught me was to really think about a problem from nothing, and that is what is research. So very unknowingly, and even he wasn't trying to do it probably, uh, what he did is actually built up the foundation of what I do every day today. How, if I'm given any problem, and that can be anything, how would you start thinking about it, how you will break it down into bite sized pieces so that you can solve the problem. Those kind of things, that's what he actually taught me. And it doesn't really have to do with only computer programming. It is much more broader than that. So that's my feeling. Yeah. It was essentially my father's job. He had a transferable job, and he had a posting in Durgapur for, and because it's an industrial town, my father was an engineer, so he had the job there for, I think from when I was 4 or 5 to when I was 12 or 13, something like that. So for a substantial time I was there. And yeah, and just because it was so diverse, it basically, even now I know that there's a lot of thought being put into diversity and stuff like that, but that came most naturally to me. I didn't have to think about us and them, because everybody was us. So I actually, it was very organic. I think kids do not have any sense of us and them. It is later on that this thing gets instilled in them. So as a kid, if you are if you are essentially exposed to a lot of diverse people with different views, different way of living, different way of doing things, everything, then you kind of don't feel the difference at all. I mean, it builds organically. There's no preaching later on, oh, you should be diverse and things like that. That is not, that comes later. That's kind of taught to people, but this is just innate in a person. And I think kids just accept people as is, if they are not taught that it is not us. I mean, these people are not like us, things like that. So I think, for me, because of this, staying in Durgapur for these, I think, some 10 years or so, at that time, because I was exposed to so many diverse ways of life, I didn't even bat an eyelid if there's somebody who is living their life differently. It's just normal. Yeah, in now I actually come in contact with many different people whom I have to work with, either as students, as colleagues, as collaborators, as various different aspects. I can accept them as an individual without any judgment or any um, preconceived notion, nothing like that. So actually life becomes much easier, in my opinion, because then you don't have to spend so much of your energy thinking, judging, all of these things. It's just, human beings coming together to solve a problem. It becomes as simple as that. So yeah. So as I mentioned before, I'm from a very normal, natural, middle class family. So I, if I look back, I'm amazed by my journey in some way. And the most important aspect, the reason why I'm here, is probably when I actually did a, actually there was a summer school that I did in Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. That was one big thing which happened right after high school. It's still that summer school still happens every year for high school students. That was fantastic because I could see the world of science being unfolded in front of my eyes, where scientists came and spoke about their research. I hardly understood anything, but it's the feeling that stayed with me, and that was amazing. So that was one thing. And actually, that is another interesting aspect of the place that I am in right now, that there were quite a few women, even when women were quite rare in science. So it is actually a good place for women to work in, according to me. And it you kind of see the proof of it, because there were women even there then, when it was pretty rare, and they were in the forefront. They were not shoved aside to just do the work and never come and talk to people, interact with people, not like that. So they were there, and they were front and center, and actually seeing their, so I didn't even understand their journey or anything. As I keep saying, it's like a feeling that I had when they said about, when they talked about their work, uh, or their experience. I can't even mention one single experience that shook me up, but it's the overall feeling that remained with me, and I thought that's what I want to be, that's what I want to do. So yeah, so I guess they were fantastic speakers. Yeah, that's otherwise why would I be so thrilled by their vision, which I didn't even understand. So yeah, that was one big aspect. The other thing actually I have to mention is my college. So I went to Presidency College in Kolkata, and as a chemistry honor student, which is essentially chemistry major. And there we had fantastic teachers. I mean, I have not seen that such dedicated teachers ever. They used to uh, be there with us, talk to us, give us books to study that were not in the syllabus, answer our quite insane questions, and stay after office hours. I mean, this is an they were dedicated teachers. They were just there for us. That kind of an experience was amazing for me. Of course, it first it really that was the first concrete uh, events which drove me to chemistry, because before that it was more a vague feeling of things happening. I have a feeling that being doing research is cool and things like that, but I didn't really understand what it entailed. But uh, being taught by the teachers in Presidency College actually gave me the first concrete push towards going in this field. So currently, actually, I should say that I am my research is in the interface of chemistry, physics, biology, and computer science. It's extremely interdisciplinary, and I don't think that uh, there should be a name for science as such. So what as you mentioned to begin with, uh, so my interest is in understanding excited state processes of biological systems. And in order to understand excited state processes, what you are really delving into is the chemistry and physics of it. And the tools that I use mainly deal with computer science tools, such as new types of programming or machine learning and things like that. So we basically build, the question is actually a question of biology. It is being answered from the perspective of a chemist or a physicist, and you are using the tools of computer science and machine learning. So that's essentially what I do. So, one of the important topics in our group you already mentioned is about melanin chemistry. It's essentially the skin pigment that we have, the human beings have, and it protects us from sunlight quite effectively. So, now the question, of course, is how does it protect us from sunlight? So those processes that actually allow melanin to absorb all of the sunlight spectrum and then quench all of that energy that it has absorbed without causing any harm to its own structure. That's actually quite fascinating chemistry if you think about it. And the reason it is fascinating, one part is of course the biological aspect, as in what happens to us human beings, that kind of a question. But the other would be, if I knew what happens in this process, can I engineer new material that has some of the exciting properties? So that's the kind of an approach that we take. So what we are most proud of is, so I talked about these excited state processes, right? We of course we, that few of the results that has come out in these excited state processes that we have elucidated is quite cool. But what I am most proud of is actually a kind of class of methods that we have developed in the group, which is heavily based on machine learning and computational chemistry to answer any such question. So, what I really dream of is one day to make this field extremely uh, efficient and easy to use. So, that's what we are trying to do, and that's what I'm most proud of. So I have quite a few PhD students, and incidentally, they also come from diverse backgrounds, and many of them women, and so on. And I am heavily invested in training them, as well as undergraduate students that we have in our groups these days, because there's a undergraduate program that has been started in IACS over the last few years. Yeah. Do not get perturbed by what people said. That still, I mean, not even younger self, that is an advice I should give me even sometimes. um, because there's a lot of negativity that comes from everywhere around, not always, but many a times. And it becomes quite overwhelming to not listen to that and keep going. So an advice to definitely my younger self would be to not care and keep going. And just to complete this, I did keep going, but I was extremely perturbed throughout, and that made me miserable. So I wouldn't like that to happen to me. Well, if people say that this is not the way to do, or what you're doing is not not in any way meaningful, or you are not capable of doing this, because to begin with, we have a lot of, and by we mean pretty much everybody, but definitely women, we have a lot of imposter syndrome. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to kind of explain to myself, to convince myself that I am good enough. And then if there's a lot of people from everywhere saying that you are not good enough, it becomes that much harder to convince myself to you know not bother and keep going. Yeah. um yeah, it's kind of like, I don't have a very catchy one though, but it's mostly, yeah, it's mostly when, um at least this is the mantra I try to live by. It is essentially to keep my head down and continue working no matter what. And kind of like, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, that kind of a stuff. uh, I would say research wise, what we are doing is extremely sustainable, in the sense that, I'm a computational chemist. um, that is my primary identity. So we are trying to do a lot of energy based research, or any of those, and all of that is being done in a very green way, right? We are um, using computational tools to engineer stuff, so that a lot of most of the chemical processes to create new material or new molecules and to try new stuff out is actually quite polluting many times, although there are quite strict rules about it, but still it is not very green most of the time. However, if that process can be narrowed down, as in I'm not saying that things should not be manufactured or created in a lab, of course it has to be, but before that, if we can tell which are the most important candidates to synthesize and things like that, that actually already um, reduces the baggage quite a lot. And that is definitely one of the main aspects of pretty much any computational chemist, and of course my group too. uh, there are two things that I do dream about. Well, the first one is okay, I will give a kind of convoluted answer here. Actually, I have been involved in a lot of outreach activities and things like that. And I see the enthusiasm in the younger students so much. As in, if you go to school students and talk about not really your work, it's like if you are even talking about um simple scientific experiments and things like that, then there's so much. They are so inquisitive. They're actually quite efficient in quantitative thinking in many ways. They are fantastic in problem solving. I just hope that someday those people will continue to be inquisitive. Somewhere down the line, we are doing something wrong so that they are forgetting to be that excited, that inquisitive. And later on in life, what we see is students who are kind of tired, burnt out, and maybe totally uh, you know blase about everything that is going on around them. So I just hope that we somehow can retain that flame in them, keep that flame burning. And here it's just an empty dream because I don't know how to do it. All I can do is keep talking to them to keep them excited. And I do like that kind of activity because it makes me feel much younger, and it makes me feel much more excited, and I keep doing that. So that's one aspect of my dream. The other one, as I mentioned before, we are heavily invested in making in developing new methods for computational chemistry. And of course, one day I hope that these programs will be so popular and so much used that chemistry 90% of it will be done in the computer. That will of course make it much more sustainable. uh, yeah, that's a big dream, I think. But even if the percentage increases, I will like that very much.